What we're doing today, actually, at Compass, I think that's really important. I think that will be central to getting more young people involved in mainstream politics, and that gives me reason for hope for the future.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Ellie O'Hagan. Go for it.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. As already been mentioned, I actually didn't know I was speaking. So until about 10 minutes ago. So bear with me if I ramble a bit. I think there's been some really interesting points raised so far, and I definitely think there is an issue with what we have been left as a generation in terms of the sort of society we live in. And I must say how flattering it is to still be considered young enough to be talking about youth politics. But I think that, and I'm going to sound like a real sort of card-carrying socialist right now, but, you know, if the shoe fits. I think the issue is not one of generation. I don't think we should be thinking about our parents and us and the division that lies between them. I think the issue is really, it's about what one class is doing very deliberately to another. That's what's happening in our society at the moment. The children of Bob Diamond aren't going to be disenfranchised. They're not going to be worrying about, do we have a job? What are our prospects? They'll be just fine, as will most of the children of the rich people in our society, the wealthiest, the most elite members of society. They'll be just fine, as they've always been. And as statistics are showing, they will actually be probably better than they were before. And I think that really, as much as I value generation, I think it's an important thing to talk about in politics, the sort of society that we are leaving for our children. I think really we need to be clear about this, that this is something being done very deliberately by one class to another, not by one generation to another. And I think that is really the division that we need to focus on as the left. Class is the ultimate issue for the left, and that's something that we really need to focus on. Generation has its values, but it's not the main issue, and I feel that it's distracting, if anything, from what is a real problem, which is a small group of very wealthy, very powerful individuals screwing over the rest of us, putting it quite frankly.
Tom, do the Liberal Democrats agree with that assessment?
Let's give a politician's answer. I think it speaks well of the future of party cooperation that so much of what I was going to say has been already addressed by various of the panel members. So I carefully avoided your question then and gave an excuse for why you might feel that some of what I'm about to say has been said before. I think there are some good points made about class. I think young people are facing some particularly difficult times. It's been said, you know, so often it's become a cliche, but it's no less true that they're bearing the brunt of the recession. They'll be paying the debt long after, you know, other generations may have retired. And they're having their vital public services cut, like education. And I think most importantly, young people are experiencing a serious lack of trust and empathy with the politicians that claiming to represent them. And I'm a Liberal Democrat saying that. But that makes it all the more important that young people stay engaged. And I think that we do need to have more young people taking an active role. But it's easy to just say there should be more young people in politics. I think what's actually important is to look at the structure and to look at the way that young people engage. And obviously, political organisations for young people like Compass Youth, like the NUS, like Liberal Youth, they all have a role to play in that. But I think what we have at the moment in our society is a problem that there are kind of two politics. There's young people's politics, which young people get to have a say in, but not make any of the decisions. And then there's normal people's politics, which everyone else gets to just decide. That's a really false divide, because we're seen in the media as, you know, wanting to engage only in the issues which directly affect young people, tuition fees, or, you know, issues which the red top papers have decided to designate as, you know, young crazy lefties, you know, drugs policy, or, you know, nuclear weapons, or, you know, occupations and things like that. And these are all important issues, sure, but actually young people care about issues across the political spectrum. And we need to be engaging not just in young people's organisations. Many people will come into politics through the NUS, through their student union, through the youth wings of their political parties. But that can't be the extent of it. That can't be where we get involved and say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to talk about. I didn't get involved in student politics because I was wildly passionate about anything at my university. That's possibly not a good thing to say, but I got involved because I was passionate about the way the country was run, that I cared about national and international issues, and there was no openings for anything like that. There was no way for young people to engage in that. So you get involved where you can. But I think what we need to be focusing on for the future is creating more opportunities for young people to engage in what other people see as grown-up politics. Because there shouldn't be this divide. There shouldn't be young people for young people's issues and everyone else for the other issues. We need more young people in Parliament, we need more young people on local councils, and we need more young people in the European Parliament talking about all the issues, because they all interconnect. And unless young people can have the voice, and like you say, yeah, it is to an extent about class, and that it applies to things across the political boundaries. It's not confined to one area. So if we can't speak out on issues beyond young people's politics, we're never going to be able to affect the meaningful change that our generation's going to need.
Thank you very much, Tom. Shiv, go ahead.
I think I've been kind of left with the anti for everything here, so I have to kind of be a bit more provocative. I'm going to start by saying I dislike the word progressive immensely. I think it's totally vacuous. And I think if, conservatives can use it, then what does it become? What does it mean? At the heart of that complaint, really, is a desire to understand, well, what do we want, right? I mean, not just young people, but everyone, right? That's ultimately, you can't just say, well, we would like to be good. We like to be nice. That doesn't really work as a political framework for understanding. Ellie mentioned, I am a big proponent of seeing things through generation and generations. And the reason for that is because it's to do with time and how things transform and shift over time. There's a very simple study that we did with our book. I say we because there's a co-author, Ed Hauker, which was looking at how young people sort of aged 20 to 30 now were living, and how they were living previously, about 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And when we did that comparative exercise, we found that actually life today is much harder for some very basic things. And those basic things, which I'll come to in a second, are kind of what's been going on. This is why we've seen this kind of, I'd say, great awakening for young people, not just in the Middle East, but around Europe as well, whether it's the Indignados in Spain and in Greece, or it's the sort of jilted generation here, it's the protests in December. And what's going on is people have kind of realized this. Their life as they thought it would work out has gone to shit. It's not really ever going to work out in the way that they thought it would. So the idea was this. They sold a wonderful promise. It's a really wonderful promise, the promise of aspiration, actually, which is ostensibly a conservative thing, that if you work hard, if you go to university, you'll be able to reach for the stars. You'll be able to reach for the stars, you'll get a wonderful house, you'll get a great job, don't worry, everything will be okay. And you know what? It hasn't really worked like that. In fact, it's not worked like that at all. And people are coming out of university going, why did I just do all of that? Why did I spend 3 years at university and come out and realize that I'm going to be unemployed maybe for a number of years? I'm going to have to work for free as an intern. I'm never going to be able to afford to buy a house, which is the aspiration part of that, let alone be able to afford my own rent to keep a roof over my head. Now, these suddenly become real, live issues. And the task for everyone else in this room, if they want to get involved in youth politics, which actually just adult politics with slightly, I would say, different issues, but actually more pressing in many ways, is to realize that people think, because we've lived through such an age of individualism, that it's their fault, that it's to do with them. They're the losers. They're the ones who are lazy or feckless or reckless or haven't really woken up or haven't somehow made it. They just need to do that little bit more, and suddenly it'll be okay. People have realized that it isn't true. They've realized that this is a massive systemic problem, and that everyone else around them, their peer group, is also in the same problem. They can't simply read a self-help book or go on a yoga retreat and, everything will work out. It's not working like that, because this is a desperately political situation. And when people realize that, when they realize that it's to do with the system a systemic problem, i.e. things to do with them and outside of them with other people, then it's political. And this room should be packed. Room should be absolutely packed, because those are the issues that are going to be driving political forces for the next 10 or 15 years. This massive sense of betrayal. And I think, I mean, you know, that's why I look at things through generations. I don't think most people, most young people under the age of 30, see themselves as part of a class. We can have that as part of the, I'm going to wait for the booze in a second, but I'm sure we can open that out for questions.
Thank you very much, Shiv. Some interesting points raised by all our panelists there. I'm going to open things out to the floor, so if you'd like to come up with your own questions or look more in depth at the topic of what politics can learn, or progressive politics, left-wing politics, can learn from the youth movement, the values and structures of tomorrow, we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Right, I can see a woman over here on the left who'd like to have her 2 pennies.
Right, I'm sorry, this isn't a question, but you gave me an opening for an advert. Somebody mentioned the WEA, and I just wanted to tell you that they're still alive, and that I'm being part of an initiative that is in its very early days, but to get volunteers to go out into the community, offering to do, not courses, but chats about globalisation. Because I'm absolutely convinced that we'll get no change unless the population actually understand what's going on and are there to support the politicians. If you look around the world, the people in countries where they have stood up to the IMF and demanded change, it's come from the people because they have understood the system that you're talking about.
What was the organisation?
It's the Workers' Education Association. I think one of your speakers mentioned it.
Okay, would anyone like to respond to that?
Yes, I think it was me who talked about that. I agree completely, it's still happening. I guess all I'm saying is we need to support those sorts of things much more, and that it's very easy for those of us involved in very media-savvy, exciting young movements to think that we're changing the world just by having media-savvy, exciting actions. And actually the world has changed through a series of conversations, and that there's a lot of hard work. And that's often work that we've shied away from doing. So while we should continue to have media-savvy, exciting actions, we also need to be supporting organisations like the Workers' Education Association and many more, and building our own.
Right, let's take another question if we can. The gentleman right in front of me here.
Just quickly.
There's a microphone for you.
Hello. Hi. Just a quick thing. I was going to say, where it was mentioned about it's completely right that there's a myth that young people don't care about sort of political issues. And I think it was completely right when it was said that young people do care passionately about issues, be it transport services or welfare or mainstream fees. But the difference is people aren't getting engaged in party politics because there's a perception that it's just men in suits in a Westminster bubble, it's not relevant to their lives, and they don't put the link between the issues they do care about and party politics. So I think it's sort of our job to say to these people who do care about these things, say to them, you know, look, there are homes for your views and whatever you think. And the other thing I was going to say is that with organisations like, well, I'm sort of setting up a Kent Young Labour group and things like that, and I know various people, there's, you know, Lib Dems, Greens, stuff like that as well. Now, I know it's typically the case within Young Labour, but I think people want to have more of a say in the outcome of the issues they're campaigning for. So people are campaigning, but they're not getting an input into the policy structure. You know, people, you know, obviously things like maybe Iraq or things that people are angry about, but they're not getting a chance to talk about policy. I think that's something young people feel that party politics is just them pushing almost the egos of the leaders, and they need more of a say in what their parties actually stand for.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, Shiv wants to have a word. We'll also hear from Lisa on that as well, I think. Shiv, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you're wrong. I don't think there is a home for young people's views. I don't think, given, I'm going on the record here rather than what politicians will plan to do, but going on the record of a new Labour government and then the government and the Tory governments before that, young people don't have a home in terms of actually issues like housing, right? Where do they go, right? We've had liberalisation in the markets in terms of rent control. We've got rid of that. We haven't really built any more houses.